The cast of T.J. Hooker spent the 1980s pretending to keep the city safe. The man at the wheel came home one night to a real tragedy no script ever prepared him for. Two of these actors are gone, and the rest carry stories nobody saw coming. Number 1 is the man at that wheel. William Shatner was 50 years old when he first pulled on Sergeant Hooker's uniform, the demoted detective sent back to patrol the street after his partner was gunned down, and he played him with that famous halting wait, every line landing like a verdict, every chase ending with Shatner himself sliding across the hood of a moving car. Audiences already knew the voice. He had been Captain Kirk a decade earlier, then fallen into lean years touring for whatever work he could find, at one point living out of a truck camper because the offers had dried up. Hooker carried him back into America's living rooms every Saturday night and made him a star a second time, an action hero in his 50s, at a moment most leading men were being shown the door. What the show could never write was the night of August 9th, 1999. Shatner came home to his house in Studio City and found his wife, Noreen, at the bottom of their swimming pool. He called for help, pulled her from the water, and tried to bring her back, and he could not. She was 40 years old. The man who had spent 5 seasons arriving in time to save a stranger from drowning had arrived too late to save the woman he was married to. Detectives came to the house. One of them, a real Los Angeles investigator named Mike Coffey, questioned Shatner, who handed over a time-stamped dinner receipt, placing him across town with his daughter earlier that evening. The coroner ruled the death an accidental drowning, with alcohol a factor and no evidence of foul play. For a brief, surreal stretch, the man famous for playing a cop sat on the other side of the table, answering a detective's questions about a body found in his own home. Shatner had married 4 times by then, and Noreen was his 3rd wife. He later wrote that her loss dragged him to the very edge of his own life, that the grief was the kind that makes a person wonder whether they will survive the night. A 4th marriage followed, to Elizabeth Martin, which ended in divorce in 2020 before the two reconciled in 2024. 3 daughters from an earlier marriage, Leslie, Elizabeth, and Melanie, had grown up watching their father chase fame across 6 decades. He is 95 years old now, dividing his time between Studio City and a ranch in 3 Rivers, California. At 90, he strapped into a Blue Origin rocket and flew to the edge of space, the oldest human ever to make the trip, and came back down weeping at the fragile blue thing he had just seen from above. He has buried friends, weathered 4 marriages and 1 unbearable loss, and somehow kept narrating, kept touring, kept showing up. The same actor would later win an Emmy as the lawyer, Denny Crane, proof that the career most people thought peaked in a patrol car still had another summit left in it. Between the badge and the courtroom, he hosted Rescue 911 and became the face of a travel website, a man who turned reinvention into a lifelong habit. Hooker always reached the victim before the water closed over them. Shatner reached his own wife a few minutes too late, and no script ever offered him a second take. The second name belonged to the rookie nobody took seriously until she proved them wrong. Heather Locklear joined in 1982 as Officer Stacy Sheridan, the captain's daughter, 20 years old and handling a service pistol, while the men around her kept underestimating the blonde recruit. She played Stacy with a clipped, quiet steadiness, soft-voiced, until a scene demanded she turn hard. What few viewers realized was that she was holding down 2 jobs at once. She was filming Dynasty on a separate lot the very same years, ferried across Los Angeles inside a single working day, peeling off a police uniform and padded bra on one set so a crew could glamorize her for the other. At a fan convention, she has joked that the great Joan Collins barely registered another actress was in the scene with her. Before any of that, the network had nearly written her out of Dynasty after 13 weeks, only for Spelling to hand her the cop show instead and turn a near cut into a career. She came out of a Marine colonel's household. Her father administered programs at UCLA, where she enrolled to study psychology before commercials for Pepsi and Polaroid pulled her out of school, and a manager named Joan Green steered her toward the producer, Aaron Spelling. That partnership defined the rest of her career. A decade later, Spelling would cast her as the scheming Amanda Woodward on Melrose Place, the role that brought 4 straight Golden Globe nominations. 2 rock star marriages framed those years, first to Motley Crue's drummer Tommy Lee, then to Bon Jovi guitarist Richie Sambora, who gave her a daughter Ava in 1997. The Sambora marriage ended in 2007, and yet the two of them walked Ava down the aisle together at her wedding in the spring of 2026 an exhausted, hard-won piece finally arrived at. Here is the turn the screen never hinted at. In 2018, sheriff's deputies were called to Locklear's home in Thousand Oaks twice, and in 2019, she pleaded no contest to 8 misdemeanor counts, 5 of them for battery on a peace officer and 1 for battery on emergency personnel. The rookie who once wore the uniform every Saturday night had struck the very officers who came through her door. A judge sentenced her to a residential treatment program in place of jail and 3 years of probation. She completed the program, and she has spoken openly since about the substance struggles that sat underneath all of it. Today she is 64, living near Thousand Oaks, dating the actor Lorenzo Lamas, and by every public account steadier than she has been in a long time. Stacey Sheridan spent her shifts learning to respect the badge. Heather Locklear lived the strange inversion of becoming the person the badge gets called on. Of everyone in this cast, the rookie who battered the officers at her own door may be the hardest turn to sit with. Drop a comment and tell me whether her story changed the way you watch those old patrol scenes. Third on the roster is the partner who rode shotgun with the grinning energy of a man who could not believe his own luck. Adrian Zmed played Officer Vince Romano, the feathered hair rookie who chased suspects and women with the same bounce. And for 4 seasons, he was the comic engine of the squad car. He had come up the hard way to get there. The youngest son of a Romanian Orthodox priest in Chicago, he was a high school running back until a brutal leg injury ended that dream and turned him toward the stage. He played Danny Zuko in Grease on Broadway, landed the lead T-Bird in Grease 2 across from Michelle Pfeiffer, and squeezed in Bachelor Party with a young Tom Hanks between seasons of Hooker. Both films found second lives as cult favorites, the kind teenagers quote decades later, even while the cop show paid the bills. The teen idol, it turned out, simply refused to disappear quietly into anyone's nostalgia. Then he made the choice that still puzzles people who loved the show. After the 4th season, Zmed walked away from the patrol car to host Dance Fever, the syndicated dance competition, trading the role that had made him a household name for a microphone and a flashing floor. The series he left behind is the one still running in dozens of countries. The series he chose faded inside a couple of years. He has never seemed to regret the swap, and he picked up a daytime Emmy along the way for a children's special. Ever since, he has leaned into that teen idol past with humor, fronting a reality show called Confessions of a Teen Idol and singing for crowds aboard cruise ships. 3 marriages followed, settling at last with Lisa Lynn in 2012, and at 72 he is still out on the road, touring stage productions with old friends like Sally Struthers and Donnie Most, and producing a documentary about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Vince Romano rode at Hooker's side for 4 solid seasons. Adrian Zmed left the whole show for a dance floor, and the reruns kept circling the globe without him. The next man on this list spent the series barking orders from behind the captain's desk, yet on a movie screen he once played one of the real burglars who helped bring down an American president. Number 4 ran the precinct. Richard Hurd played Captain Dennis Sheridan, Stacey's father, and the institutional voice Hooker forever bristled against, a heavy-browed man who could deliver a reprimand with a single flat look. Some said he resembled Carl Malden. Casting directors simply knew to call him when a scene needed a face of authority. He was 49 when the show began, already a veteran of a strange and difficult road. As a boy in Boston, he spent month after month in hospital beds with a bone infection, dosed with the newly invented penicillin, and he later credited those still, bored hours with building the imagination that made him an actor. He served during the Korean War, accepted an honorable discharge when his old illness flared, and worked off-Broadway in New York for years before a camera ever found his face. His first film role arrived at nearly 40, a bit part opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in Hercules in New York, and the work scarcely stopped for the next 5 decades. What the squad room never revealed was where else that face had been. Hurd stepped in to play Watergate burglar James McCord in All the President's Men, the film about the real conspiracy that toppled Richard Nixon. He turned up again in The Onion Field, the true account of a Los Angeles police officer kidnapped and murdered in 1963. The man who commanded a fictional captain's desk had stood, in 2 different films, inside real American crime, once as a lawbreaker operating at the highest level of government, and once inside the killing of an actual cop. Most audiences knew him later as Mr. Wilhelm, George Costanza's clueless boss across 11 episodes of Seinfeld, and never once connected the threads. Science fiction fans knew yet another man entirely, the alien commander of the miniseries 5 and an admiral across 2 Star Trek series, and Jordan Peele handed him a small, sharp role in the horror film Get Out near the very end of his life. He married the actress Patricia Crowder in 1980, and the two of them stayed together for 40 years. On May 26, 2020, he died at their Los Angeles home of cancer. 87 years old, his family gathered close around him. He left Patricia, a daughter, a son, and a stepdaughter, along with a body of work that millions had watched for decades without ever learning the name attached to it. For a decade, he also sat on the national board of his actors' union and served a term as its vice president, a quiet advocate for the working performers around him. Captain Sheridan kept a fictional city in line. Richard Hurd slipped in and out of real crimes for decades, his face famous, his name a quiet secret. The fifth officer lasted exactly 1 season and then vanished from television completely. April Clough played Officer Vicky Taylor in that short first run, the Academy desk clerk who longed for the street and kept swatting away Romano's advances with a dry, knowing patience. When the show retooled and brought in Heather Locklear's character to fill the rookie slot, Clough was written out, and within a few years she left acting altogether. Most people assumed that was where her story ended. It turned out to be the opposite of an ending. Born Gillian Wood and raised in Fort Lauderdale, she had studied at Temple University and the London School of Economics and sung in a girl group called the Pin-Ups before Hollywood ever found her. Her screen resume ran from a 1977 comedy to a small part in Earth Girls Are Easy, though none of it ever held her the way business eventually would. Walking away from the camera in the end looked far more like a choice than a defeat. In 1984, she married Greg Giuffria, the keyboardist behind the rock bands Angel and House of Lords, and when his music career wound down, she became the quiet architect of his second act. Her connections to serious money, including the former chief of Chrysler, Lee Iacocca, helped Giuffria buy into a gaming technology company in the late 1990s and build it into a real force in the casino business. What began as an option on a small firm grew into a venture that helped reshape how casino floors ran, and the press in Las Vegas credited her, by name, as the engine behind that climb. At 73, she lives in the one city on Earth that runs entirely on odds, a long way from a desk she sat behind for 5 episodes. Vicky Taylor wanted off that desk and onto the street more than anything in the world. April Clough left the entire soundstage and built a fortune in the town where everyone bets. If you want to know where every single one of these faces ended up, subscribe and stay with me, because the next 2 stories are the hardest ones on the whole list to tell. 6th is the smooth one, the veteran who made the rookies look like children. James Darren joined in the 2nd season as Officer Jim Corrigan, Stacy's seasoned partner, all matinee polish and easy calm, the settled adult in every squad car scene. The audience had adored him since he was a boy. He had been Moondoggy in the Gidget Beach pictures and a genuine pop star with a record that climbed to number 3 on the charts in 1961. A South Philadelphia kid who trained under the great teacher Stella Adler and spent years trying to outrun the teen idol label that trailed him everywhere he went. The Gidget films had crowned him a heartthrob, and he reached for something heavier in war pictures like The Guns of Navarone, restless inside the pretty boy image the studios kept selling. He found himself a beautiful third act. After Hooker, he moved behind the camera as a television director on shows like Melrose Place, and then, late in his life, he revived his singing voice as Vic Fontaine, the holographic lounge crooner on Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, performing old standards in a tuxedo for a brand new generation. A craftsman behind the camera as easily as in front of it, he kept directing hit dramas straight through the 90s. He married the former Miss Denmark Evie Norland in 1960 and stayed married to her for the rest of his days, more than 60 years, raising 3 sons, one of whom grew up to become a national news correspondent. The singer Nancy Sinatra called him one of the dearest friends of her entire life. His eldest son, Jim Murray, would one day report the news of his father's death to the world himself. The end came on September 2nd, 2024. Darren had checked into Cedars-Sinai for a heart valve replacement, but his doctors found him too weak to survive the operation, and he slipped away in his sleep in the cardiac unit at 88, after telling his family that he loved them. His old partner from the squad car, William Shatner, mourned him in public as a loving and gifted man. The boy who had once surfed onto screens forever young stayed exactly that, in his son's words, right up until the lights went out. Jim Corrigan chased criminals to the final commercial break every single week. James Darren spent his last days in a hospital bed pouring love into his family before the lights went down. One name still left on this list was only a small child when she appeared on the show, and she grew up to film her own cancer surgery and hand it to millions of strangers. Seventh is the little girl who played the sergeant's daughter. Nicole Eggert was 10 years old when she turned up as Chrissy Hooker, the glimpse of the family the divorce had fractured, the soft proof that the man with the badge went home to someone who loved him. She was already a working child model, and this show was one of her earliest credits before the bigger ones arrived, Jamie on Charles in Charge, and then Summer Quinn on Baywatch, running the California shoreline in front of the entire planet. For one generation, she was the girl next door, and for the next, the lifeguard everyone recognized, a steady fixture across 2 full decades of television. The hardest role of her life came with no script at all. In December of 2023, doctors diagnosed her with a stage 2 breast cancer after she found a lump during a self-examination. Symptoms she had first brushed off as ordinary middle age, and instead of hiding it the way so many former child stars would, she did the opposite. She pointed the camera at herself and narrated the whole ordeal: the chemotherapy, 2 mastectomies, the reconstruction, the raw fear of looking death in the face, and posted all of it for the strangers who had grown up watching her. By late 2025, her pathology reports came back clear. She has said flatly that this fight is who she is now, more than any beach or any sitcom ever was, and that the people who stop her on the street to talk about her recovery mean far more than the ones who only remember the swimsuit. At 54, she is a single mother of 2 daughters, Delyn and Keegan, who carried her through the worst of it. Out of the wreckage, she has built something useful, urging other women to check their own bodies before a lump becomes a verdict. Chrissy Hooker existed to show the soft heart behind a hard cop. Nicole Eggert grew up and showed the world her own scars, daring it to look away. The last name belongs to the woman who played the wound at the center of the whole premise. Lee Bryant was Fran Hooker, the ex-wife, the living reminder of the marriage the job had quietly destroyed, and she played her with a worn tenderness, the warmth of a woman who still cared for a man she could no longer live beside. Her presence grounded the action hero in a soft failure, and then, after a couple of seasons, the part was handed off to a different actress. Bryant built a long, durable career that most people watched without ever catching her name. A Manhattan stage actress by training, she was the hysterical passenger in Airplane, and its sequel, the woman slapped back to her senses by a whole line of worried strangers, and she appeared as a wife in the thriller Capricorn 1 before turning up across Kojak, Charlie's Angels, Saint Elsewhere, and Moonlighting, all the way to a quiet role in Friends with Kids in 2011. Decade after decade she worked, a reliable hand directors trusted, content to be the face nobody could quite place. Trained in New York theater, she had the range to slide from broad comedy to taut thriller without anyone clocking that the same woman did both. She kept her private life genuinely private, far from the press, and she is believed to be 80 years old now, living quietly, one of the very few from this cast who never chased a single headline. Fran Hooker was the wife a cop's devotion left behind. Lee Bryant outlasted that fictional heartbreak by half a century and never once needed a spotlight to do it. The patrol car still circles every rerun, doors open, siren low, 2 seats now empty and the rest scattered from a Las Vegas casino to the edge of space.